Joining us and speaking to CNBC-TV18. Well, moving on, the U.S. presidential race is well underway as the Republican candidate Donald Trump and the latest entrant Democrat candidate Kamala Harris battle it out for the top job. Prashant has moved to the wall. Prashant, what are the latest polls saying? And more important, where does Kamala Harris stand when it comes to various political issues?
Well, thank you for that. The premise of sort of putting this piece together is basically very simple. The election in the U.S. in November is going to be between Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, Trump, we all know what he stands for. We know his views on taxation, oil, where he wants the dollar to be, what he wants to do with regards to China, Europe. We know the whole thing, right? Because he's been president before, and of course, it's been so well covered. We also kind of knew where Biden stood. Now, the assumption which many are making is that because Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris has stepped in as a presidential candidate, she will mostly follow in Biden's policy playbook. And that maybe is correct as well. But, what are her own views? What are her own preferences? Because this is now a close race. A month ago, markets were kind of very comfortable in the assumption that Donald Trump is going to sweep the polls because he was fighting Joe Biden, which isn't the case anymore. You have one of the largest betting websites in the U.S. predicted now saying that Democrats will win the election. The actual elections are still, 80, 90 days away, and a lot could happen in that time period. But the point is, it's a real fight in that sense. So that's the premise of this particular piece. What are Harris's own views on just 4 or 5 important policy matters? So on taxation, this is what she believes. She's expected to keep Biden's tax plan intact at a broad level. The key difference is that she supported raising corporate taxes in the U.S. to 35%. And that is the reason why the general sort of undertone with many, especially in financial markets, is that, you're going to take a slightly more leftish kind of lean as far as policy matters are concerned. She also suggested taxing stocks, bonds, and derivative trading to fund social programs. So that's the other kind of thing that I picked up in terms of what her own preferences are. On tariffs, where does she stand? She's been a known critic of Trump tariffs. Trump, of course, his most preferred tool of negotiation is tariffs, right? She's against it, and she stated, and I quote, "I'm not a protectionist Democrat." One of the big things which is expected to change in the first 100 days after the U.S. elections, if Republicans take control, is the use of tariffs. In terms of other countries. On foreign policy, it's interesting. Most likely continued policy in terms of the conflict in Ukraine and Israel and their support to both countries. But Harris has been more vocal in reprimanding Israel for some of its actions during the conflict in Gaza. Interestingly, she skipped Netanyahu's address to the Congress when he was visiting the U.S. recently. So that is something at the margin which is perhaps slightly different. On energy policy, oil prices, she'll likely expand investments in clean energy. Her suggested climate plan was worth $10 trillion against Biden, who suggested spending $1.6 trillion. And of course, she is in favor of complete ban on fracking. Fracking is a measure for oil production. On technology, she's historically pushed for more tech regulation. She's, by the way, the lead on AI regulation in the current administration, whereas Biden wanted to bust up and break up large technology giants. Her kind of policy preference seems to be steps to ensure more customer privacy. On immigration, I think there is not very much difference. On healthcare, she supported expansion of Medicare to all Americans, and she's likely to maintain the push to lower drug prices in the U.S. So just, some differences. Largely, I think it would be right to assume that she would continue what Biden's policy book is. But I think also important to remember, if she is, come November, elected president, what she really stands for and what her own views are. Back to you.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Well, lots of action there on the political setup in the United States. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Editor's Roundtable. More news and updates coming up on the other side.